Hello again, everyone. I am Chris Dugan, sports editor at the Observer Reporter. You're watching the OR Sports High School Football Wrap-Up Show. Joining me today, Dale Lolley, the Steelers beat writer for the OR, but Dale's here to talk a little high school football this week. We're going to talk about some close games, some undefeated teams. One of them plays home games right here. It's South Fayette. The Lions have a big game this week against Newcastle. We'll hear from Joe Rossi, the head coach of the Lions. South Fayette had an interesting game last week that we'll get to. Dale, one of the games last week that we're going to talk about is the Cannon-McMillan-Altoona game. You can't get much closer than these two teams were. It was tied at the end of regulation. It goes to overtime. Cannon-McMillan wins 14-7 in overtime. One of the shortest overtimes you're ever going to see.
Yeah, it was two plays that Brian Milligan, who returned last week and got 49 carries, which was a school record, goes 10 yards in overtime to score the game-winning touchdown, and then they get the interception on the first play by Altoona in overtime and seal that victory. Big win for Cannon Mac. That was their first section win of the year. And in that quad A, or that 6A section now, I should say, everybody's kind of bunched up there. You've got a bunch of teams with 1, 2, or just 3 wins, and you're heading into these final 4 games of the regular season. There's a lot left to be played for in that section.
Yeah, in that game, Brian Milligan, you might recall Brian Milligan was the leading rusher in Quad A football last year. He was injured in the Big Mac season opener this year. Last week against Altoona, 273 yards rushing on 49 carries. That's a school record. That's probably a record for any school around here. Another close game was California winning 24-22 over Mon Valley rival Monessen, and California is really in the thick of the Tri-County South Conference race. They're only a game behind Carmichaels and Fort Cherry in the loss column.
Yeah, and they gave Fort Cherry all they could handle, losing 26-20 to them earlier this year.
Yeah,
so this should be an interesting game.
It was the season opener, and I think a lot of people really underestimated California at that point.
Yeah, and it should be interesting. This is going to be a tester this week for Carmichaels, and they got to get through this one. They can't get caught looking ahead to Fort Cherry.
That was the second week in a row when California had a big fourth quarter, won 2 weeks ago at Mapletown by scoring 17 points in the fourth quarter. We mentioned South Fayette had a close game. South Fayette comes from behind, wins 28-21 at Blackhawk. The kicker in that one is Blackhawk was winning 21-0 at halftime, and South Fayette rallies with 4 touchdown passes in the second half, wins game number 43 in a row in the regular season, remains undefeated.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, if I'm Joe Rossi, that's the kind of games that I want to play in the regular season. Those are the kind of games that you can point to when you get into the postseason and you run up against good football teams, that you can say to the kids, hey, look, we came back from 21 down. You guys stuck with it. You can do it in this situation as well.
We're going to hear from Joe Rossi in a minute. I will tell you that South Fayette rallied to win that game with 4 touchdown passes by Drew Saxton, the quarterback. 3 of them went to Dan Trimber. They covered 7-10 and 3 yards. The latter was the game winner with 1:10 remaining. The Lions moved to 4-0, 6-0 overall, 4-0 in the Northwest 9 Conference. They host Newcastle this weekend.
Do we know anybody that lives from Newcastle?
Maybe that Toscano guy that shows up here every once in a while. Newcastle lost to Mars last week, but that's a good Mars team that Newcastle lost to. They're going to present a lot of trouble for South Fayette this week. We had a chance to talk to Joe Rossi a little bit about last week's game, a little bit about the Newcastle game coming up, and here's his comments. I'm here with Joe Rossi, the head coach at South Fayette. And Joe, your team has a 43-game winning streak in the regular season, and I bet win number 43 last week at Blackhawk was unlike any of the first 42.
Yeah, being down 21-0 would be the first time that we've been able to come back from that margin. We've had a couple 14-point deficits last year with Seton, and then 2 times at Heinz Field at Aliquippa, but being down 21.5 is a large task, and our kids were up to the challenge.
Was the deficit a result of Blackhawk just playing well, or some mistakes that you had made?
These combination of both. Blackhawk came ready to play as we knew they would. They were 3-1 team coming in, and 29 seniors on their roster. So there was a very heavily dominated senior class. So they've been in some games and have some experience. So we told the kids all week, you can't look at scores. You can never, we start doing that. That's what losing programs do. We don't ever match up scores. We just focus on the opponent. And so we threw an interception, had a short field, and we were able to come back, and kids at halftime just believed in themselves.
What was the mood like at halftime? This is a situation your kids were not used to being in.
Yeah, you went in there, and similar to last year, you just saw them, waiting for our words, and there was no yelling, screaming at them. It was just, hey, we need to be able to. No panic at all. Even though inside, internally I was a little bit, but I wasn't going to let them see it in my face. And in all honesty, we have 22 seniors, so we looked at them and talked about playing for the guy next to you. That was our whole pregame message, and it continued through halftime.
Now, you win by scoring 4 touchdowns in the second half. The game winner with 1:10 left, and 4 touchdown passes by quarterback Drew Saxton. He's been a pretty good force for you. When you consider last year, he wasn't even the clear-cut starter at the beginning of the year.
Drew, come into last year, and as a sophomore, you make sophomore mistakes, and we're not seeing as many this year as a junior. We're seeing him just in the second half there. He just all of them. The protection was better than the first half. We ran the football better, so it was just a combination of everybody, not just him, and receivers getting open, and he was able to find them. And most importantly, defensively, we had 6 straight 3-and-outs, which we were able to step up defensively to get the ball back for them.
I assume at halftime you were telling your guys defensively, we can't let them score again.
Yeah, we
had to come up with it.
We talked about 3-and-out and then scoring first possession. We got the 3-and-out, but we went 3-and-out. So that was when in your mind you're like, wow, that was a great opportunity for us to do something, and we didn't. So we got another 3-and-out, and then started rolling from there.
Now in that game, Giovanni Love with the 100-yard rushing game. The conventional wisdom is you beat South Fayette if you can stop the passing game. But it seems like every big game that you guys win, you have a running back with 100 yards.
Yeah, it gets lost.
That probably says a lot about the people in front of the running backs blocking.
Absolutely, it gets lost, and when you throw the ball 40 times, you got to have an offensive line that can pass pro, and for us, running the football is the key. The games where we got a 100-yard rusher, the games that we're winning and doing well.
Now, who are some of those guys that have been up front for you that have done the job?
Yeah, our returning guys starts with Alex Minford, Andrew Gedries, and Brent Coyne, and those guys are all starters from last year. And Chris Yelling, Ray Eldridge, Tommy Elia, Benny Coyne, those are all guys. Jake Walker, they're all rotating. We got about 8 kids that we play, and doing a great job for us.
Now, this year you were in 4A as opposed to 2A last year. None of the teams that are in your conference you've played before. It almost looks like Ram McNally made your schedule.
Yeah.
No more Seton LaSalle, no more Steel Valley. But does that make it a little more interesting?
Yeah, we like change. And it was we like playing teams that we don't know what we're going to get, and watching them. You kind of get in a groove of what guys do, and Seton, Steel Valley, and we know what kind of coming at us, the Aliquippa at Heinz Field, and know what we're going to see pretty much. And now it's different this year, with different formations, different guys, different personnel.
You have a big game this week against Newcastle. Now they were beaten handily last week by a good Mars team that you defeated. But Newcastle will provide a pretty stiff challenge.
That's what I told you. The first thing, you can never look at scores. You got 2 tremendous athletes here, Division I kids with big-time offers that are coming here, and we know that they're going to pose a great challenge to our defense.
Okay, Joe, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Joe Rossi for those comments. Dale, there was one game last week I want to touch upon. It was either great offense or terrible defense. It was a game involving Jefferson Morgan and Avella in the Tri-County South. The game was played at Parker Field in Jefferson. Now, the final score is 59-34. Okay, that's not too far out of the ordinary. Start looking.
Pretty unordinary.
But 59-34 in the modern era is not that out of the ordinary. But listen to this. Jefferson Morgan had 749 yards of offense. This is a team that lost last week to West Green, which had lost 18 games in a row. Jefferson Morgan scored 6 points against West Green.
Yeah.
They come back last week and put up 749 yards.
I think, if memory serves, they had scored 4 touchdowns in their first 5 games, and they pretty much ran through that in the first half of that game. So, yeah, it was definitely a track meet.
Yes, if you were a defensive coach, you were cringing. Had the shakes watching that game. Joe Headley, the running back for Jefferson Morgan, 36 carries, 370 yards. Jefferson Morgan had more than 500 yards rushing in that game. That's unheard of. I don't remember a game with a high school team with 500
More
yards.
importantly,
rushing.
Jeff Morgan had about 200 yards passing.
Yeah.
That's
Well, both teams combined for more than 1,000 yards. I've heard of 1,000-yard games in college football, but I don't think I've ever heard of a high school game producing 1,000 yards, especially a game involving teams from the Washington and Greene County.
and 2 Class A teams as well that really don't throw the ball all over the field a lot and are built around those running games. It was, you want to see what Jeff Morgan does this week, if that is something, if they've somehow turned the corner and found something there, or if it was, just an anomaly in that game. If I'm a Vela,
I'd be a little worried
I'd be a little worried about the rest of the year.
Now, we have 4 undefeated teams remaining in the OR coverage area. One of them is South Fayette, as we've touched on. Another one is Belle Vernon. Another is Wash High. And the 4th is Fort Cherry. Now, this week, you would think that those teams probably will remain undefeated. Chartiers Houston actually leads Wash High by a half game in the Century Conference. Chartiers Houston 4-0 in conference play. Washington's 3-0. Prexies are undefeated. This week they play at Bentworth. Bentworth, coming off a good win last week over Charleroi, held Charleroi to less than 30 yards total offense. Stopping the little Prexies is a little different than stopping Charleroi.
Absolutely, and Washington will throw the ball, they'll run the ball. Obviously, they have great athletes on the field, and it's going to be interesting here. Washington closes out, I believe it closes out its regular season. It plays Chartiers Houston and then Burgettstown. Those are the other teams that it's fighting with for that championship in that conference. That's going to be a tough test.
Right now, the showdown game in the Century Conference, the game of the century, if you will, is October 14th when Wash High goes to Chartiers Houston. Now, Belle Vernon is tied with Thomas Jefferson in the Big 9 Conference for first place. Both of those teams are undefeated. They meet October 14th. That game's at TJ. This week, Belle Vernon goes to Trinity, and Trinity's still in the playoff race. They had a win last week, keeps them in the playoff race. But the kicker here is Trinity has never beaten Belle Vernon in football.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough test for Trinity, and probably going to come down to Trinity versus Ringgold for that last playoff spot in that section.
That game, Belle Vernon is at Trinity. That's at Hiller Field. Now, Fort Cherry trails Carmichaels by a half a game in the Tri-County South. Fort Cherry 3-0 in league play. Carmichaels is 4-0. This week, Fort Cherry hosts Avella. So
Lots of offense.
Lots of offense there. Carmichaels has a tricky game against third place California. We were talking a little bit about California. If you're Carmichaels, you can't get caught looking ahead.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I think if you're the Carmichaels coaching staff, you show them the film of them playing of California playing Fort Cherry. If you can get a hold of that and show them the score and say, hey, look, these guys can beat you. You better come out and play your A game.
Now, one thing we should mention, if you were planning on going out to McMurray to catch the Pine-Richland at Peters Township game this year, you might have been going just to see Phil Jerkovic, who's a quarterback for Pine-Richland. He is a Notre Dame recruit. He's an All-American high school quarterback. We understand that he will not be playing in that game, Dale.
And may not play the rest of the year. He had surgery on his thumb, as that's the word on the street. And it's going to be interesting to see what Pine-Richland does at quarterback. The other 2 quarterbacks on their roster are both sophomores, 5'10" and 5'9". Jerkovic is 6'5". So you're downgrading a little bit there. It wouldn't surprise me if they took a position player and moved him to quarterback at least a little bit against Peters Township to see if what they got to do there, because this is a playoff team in Pine-Richland, and they can't afford, if Jerkovic misses the rest of the year, to stumble.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see if he can come back if he does have surgery on that injured thumb. That does it for this week. Dale, thank you for joining me. Till next week, enjoy the games.